It can be very overwhelming when you're drafting and you're up to pick and there's just so many big names on the board available. You don't really know who to take. Well, we got you, because in this video we're talking about the best players to draft in every single round. Before we get into it though, crack open your energy drink. I got the White Monster as always. Starting in round 1, I think the best player to draft is Bijan Robinson for a multitude of reasons. One being, he's going 8th overall. I would not be shocked if a year from now he's the consensus 101. I think that's how big of a year he's going to have. We can briefly touch on last year, which is probably why he's being drafted at the spot he is, because of the dumpster fire that last season was because of Arthur Smith. Now, like, looking at zooming out the big picture, like, Robinson wasn't terrible, RB17 in fantasy points per game. He was a solid RB2, but that's not where you drafted him last year. He's kind of going in the same spot that you drafted him last year this year. And Arthur Smith, I mean, he was 31st in opportunity share, 32nd in red zone touches, because Mr. Smith thought Tyler Algier, the 5th round running back, or Jonnu Smith were better options to touch the ball in the red zone. To this day, I still don't understand. I don't know how Arthur Smith has a job. But fast forward to this year, it's a completely different situation with new head coach Raheem Morris, new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, both coming over from the Rams. That in itself is a huge, huge upgrade. They've already talked about how they want to use Bijan in the CMC role. I think Bijan is a younger CMC, and he honestly might be more talented. He can do it on the ground. He's a bigger back. He's elusive. He's dominant in the receiving game as well. I mean, just look at some of those highlight catches he made, catching it behind his back. He is special. I want Bijan in every possible draft that I can get him. They bring in quarterback Kirk Cousins from Minnesota. That's also huge because Desmond Ridder is not an NFL starting quarterback. He's a backup at best. Kirk Cousins was playing at an MVP level last year for Minnesota before he tore his Achilles. I'm really excited to see what Cousins does in this offense. So this situation is completely opposite from last year. New head coach, huge upgrade at quarterback. The offense is going to be really good, really efficient. They're going to be in scoring position a lot. They have a top 3 offensive line, very underrated unit, which you love when you're drafting the running back for that team. Like I said, the offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, already talked about using Bijan in that CMC role, which, I mean, if he gets that, RB1 overall is likely. Like, that's how good this dude is. It's really hard to rank Gibbs, Breece Hall, and Bijan Robinson. I've been going back and forth, but I'm going to plant my flag in this video. I think Bijan Robinson is going to be the RB1 overall this year. He's my RB1 in my rankings as well. It's Bijan, Breece, CMC, and Gibbs for me. Robinson is going to be the next great running back, the next great fantasy running back. Don't miss out on getting him this year. I drafted a lot of Bijan last year, and I don't like drafting the same player 2 years in a row, and I don't like drafting a guy after he burned me. But what I've learned from playing fantasy football for a long time is that you want to draft a guy who's coming off a disappointing year, because most of the time, especially these younger guys, they typically bounce back, especially because Bijan is in a completely different situation. Now, if you told me that Arthur Smith was still the head coach and Desmond Ridder was still the starting quarterback, I would be hesitant. But because the situation is completely different, Bijan is an absolutely must draft in all formats. I'd reach on him. I think he could be a top 5 fantasy pick in drafts this year. Be aggressive getting him on your team, and you can thank me later. In round 2, it's going to be another running back, and I was going back and forth between 2 guys. You know how much I love Devon Achane. Love Devon Achane this year. I think he has the most upside probably out of any player in round 2. I will admit, though, he probably has maybe the most risk out of any player in round 2. So it's a risk reward. I like to take players who have the upside And if they carry some risk, you have to take calculated risks in fantasy football if you want to win the championship. But for today, the guy who was right next to Achane was Saquon Barkley. Man, he finally got out of the dumpster fire with the Giants. Thank God we're putting a talented player on a talented offense, because his talents were just getting wasted away with the Giants, who were... It was probably his worst year in terms of supporting casts in New York last year. I mean, Daniel Jones tears his ACL. They're bringing dudes off the couch to play on the offensive line. Like, I'm surprised they didn't call me out there. I mean, come on. Drink. They were the third worst run blocking offensive line last year. They ranked 29th in total yards and 30th in points. It was just... So, like, if you look at some of the advanced metrics, they're not... I mean, his yards per carry were 3.9 yards per carry, because he was the only threat on that offense. So what do you think the defensive game plan was? Stop Saquon, because who else are we worried about? Like, they didn't have a quarterback, and they had no offensive weapons outside of Saquon. But now you're putting Barkley on a really good Philadelphia team with a new offensive coordinator. So the Eagles are going to fix whatever happened the second half of last year. Will be fixed this year with Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator, who I like. I like his high-tempo offense, his motions, moving guys all over the field. I really like Kellen Moore. This offensive line is still a top 10 unit, even with Jason Kelce retiring. Jalen Hurts is a very good quarterback. And then they have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. The defense can't just take away Barkley, because they have a lot of other players to worry about, which I think is obviously going to be a positive. You could argue maybe Barkley doesn't see as much work in the passing game because they do have so many other options. But that being said, I still think Saquon, his touchdown upside is going to be ridiculous this year. Do not fade Barkley just because you're afraid of the brotherly shove, the tush push, whatever you want to call it. I have my doubts about it this year. You're giving every single NFL team a full year to figure out how to stop this play now. Jason Kelce, who was the anchor, if you will, of that play, he's gone. Jalen Hurts also banged up his knee last year. Not saying it was because of the brotherly shove, but I think they're going to be a little bit more careful with Hurts, because he was a different player after he hurt his knee. They're still going to let him run the ball, but maybe in those short yardage situations, they're going to give it to a capable running back like Saquon Barkley. DeAndre Swift is not Saquon Barkley. Swift is a terrible goal line, red zone back. Saquon Barkley is the total opposite. So maybe they start with the brotherly shove, and then they give Barkley a couple in close, and they're like, oh, we don't need to risk hurting our franchise quarterback. Give it to Saquon. That's what I think is going to happen. I think a lot of people are like, oh, Saquon's not going to score at all this year. Completely disagree. I think Barkley has 15-plus touchdown upside. He's entering his age 27 season. He's on the border for me age-wise, but he's still in his prime. I think when they hit, nearly 29 to 30, that's when I really start to get concerned. Even 28 is a little bit concerning, but 27 is that sweet spot. Barkley, if you look at his numbers last year, let's pull up his numbers quick and then we'll move on. He's coming off a terrible year, so I think, a relatively terrible year. He still had 10 total touchdowns, 41 receptions, but his yards per carry weren't great. I think he ran for over 100 yards once, so I think he's being faded. I don't think people are taking into account the incredible situation that he's walking into. I think he's one of the safer picks in round 2 because of the situation, the guaranteed volume he's going to get. Outside of that year and a half where he got hurt, he's been relatively healthy outside of a shoulder injury last year, but it didn't force him to miss any games. So Barkley's a safe pick. I think he's the best pick in round 2. Moving on to round 3. Before we do that, let's just do a little energy drink. Grab your whatever you got. If you're a coffee person, tea, let me know what you like. You like Monsters, Rains, Bangs, Ghost, or just water works too. That's not my speed. I mean, I do drink water, but I need the caffeine. All right, round 3, best pick for me, who I love this year, is Jalen Waddle. Another player coming off a disappointing year. He was the wide receiver 24 in fantasy points per game. Scored a career low 4 touchdowns. That won't be the case this year. He had some horrible touchdown luck. He was banged up with some unfortunate injuries where he started the game and then he left, and then he came back and then he left. Like, that happened several times with Waddle last year, which wasn't ideal. He's coming off his worst season of his career, really. But here are reasons to be optimistic that the bounce back, I think, is going to be unparalleled this year. I think Waddle is going to have a giant, enormous season. I think he's going to win a lot of people their fantasy leagues because you can get him in round 3. A lot of people are sleeping on him. And even though the baseline numbers weren't great, Waddle still set career highs in yards per route run and targets per route last year. Tyreek Hill, I know you're not going to like it, but he's 30 years old. This man is eventually going to start to decline, and that is going to be when Waddle will take over. I'm not saying that that's this year, but Tyreek Hill could lose a step this season, and Waddle will be the main beneficiary of that. And people also forget, in 2022 with Tyreek Hill, Waddle was the wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game, so he can produce with Tyreek Hill. He racked up 75 receptions for over 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. You have to remember that nothing else changed. Mike McDaniel's still there. Tua's still there. This is a wide receiver friendly scheme. This is still a potent offense. Tua's still going to feed Waddle. I think Waddle has wide receiver 1 upside this year. I think he's going to score double-digit touchdowns for the first time in his career. And I say this in almost in every video. Bet on young players who are efficient, explosive, talented, and to add to that, who are on elite offenses with brilliant head coach, brilliant play caller. It's always a smart bet to bet on a talented young player like Waddle. It's going to pay off if you do so. And I'm not a huge fan of going running back, depending on where you are in the draft. But, like, there's so much value at wide receiver, and there's not many good running backs. And I know this day and age, everyone wants to go wide receiver in the first round, which I don't mind. But let's say you're sitting at 7th overall. So you grab Bijan Robinson. Then, so let me do this. Let's just pretend we have the 7th pick. I want to do some mock drafts where I share my screen and we just kind of run through some sleeper mock drafts. But so let's say you had the 7th pick. I'm just going to pull this up so I can do this quicker. So then your next pick would be 18th overall. So going on sleeper ADPs. So you could take Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, who I'm not super high on this year, is there. And then your 3rd round would be 31, where you could then go, based on sleeper ADPs, then you could go Waddle. So you have Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley. You probably have the best running back room in the league. And then you go Jalen Waddle, who has that top 12, top 10 upside that you're getting in round 3. And then you go and probably take another wide receiver. So 31, then you have 42. So based on sleeper ADPs, you could take Cooper Kupp, who I think has a nice bounce back. Trey McBride, who we're going to talk about. DK Metcalf, Devontae Smith. A ton of good values, because if you are forced to go running back in that round, if you don't like to wait until the dead zone, you got to go James Cook or Joe Mixon, who not super high on. So that's a little off tangent, but that is an option if you do have the 7th pick, 8th pick. So Jalen Waddle, huge bounce back year, safe floor, high upside. He's going to have a career year. Draft him in round 3. He's one of your best bets to make. In round 4, Trey McBride, for me, The dude went crazy from week 8 on last year. He was the tight end 3. Let me get my numbers out. 3rd in targets, 2nd in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards. He was absolutely force-fed from Kyler Murray. And people are like, oh, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. is there now, so McBride's going to do nothing. The targets, this is very similar to Baltimore with Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. The targets are still condensed to 2 guys, Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. So if they would have added a 3rd guy, which Houston, like for the Texans, a little murky, while I am very high on Tank Dell, it's still like there's 3 guys. So there is a little risk there. But with the Cardinals, there's still only 2. So I'm coming at it from the angle of Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to help open up the middle of the field for Trey McBride. Because if you watched McBride's tape from last year, his yards after the catch most of the time weren't great because he was surrounded by defenders. So he would catch the ball and he'd get tackled right away because they were just doubling him. He was the only real threat in the passing game on offense. But now with Marvin Harrison Jr., I think he opens up the field a lot more for maybe he takes some of those double teams. And Trey McBride is going to be in a ton of advantageous situations this year. Arizona is going to be very pass heavy. Kyler Murray is going to have a career year, another year removed from that torn ACL. I love Kyler in fantasy, who we're going to touch on actually later in this video. And you're getting McBride in round 4. I'm fading Travis Kelce at cost. I'm fading Sam Laporta. I mean, Travis Kelce's going to be 35. I don't mind Mark Andrews or Kincaid, but if you really want to get a tight end in round 4 who can be the tight end 1 overall, which I think that's going to be McBride, he's an excellent pick. I love stacking him with Kyler. He's just a special player. Like, passes the eye test, athletic freak, big-bodied frame, very nice hands for a tight end. In fantasy, drafting guys that you like to watch is also a thing. Like, let's not take it too seriously sometimes. If you really like the player, you really like watching McBride, who could explode for these huge monster weeks, then take McBride. I think he's the most fun tight end to watch in the league right now. So that is that. That's round 4. I'm parched. Everyone, break, pause, go to the bathroom, take your dog out for a walk. Not for a walk. Let him go potty. Take a drink of your energy drink. Oh, my back hurts. All right. Moving on to round 5. My last video, go check it out if you would like to. In kind of this new format where I'm just being very raw, real, not performing. We're just friends at a bar. We're just friends throwing the pigskin around in the backyard, talking fantasy football. That's what I want to be for you guys. I don't want to just like spit out all these numbers that you're not going to remember and just... Fantasy is about the stats, but I also really like to focus on... There's some gut that just comes into fantasy. It's more than just like, oh, this is what this guy did last year, so based on the statistical numbers, that's what he's going to do this year. It's a lot more than that. If you want to win your fantasy league, you have to pay attention to situations changing, the players around the guy that we're talking about, the coaching staff, what happened... what happened the previous year is important. And then just kind of like trusting your gut in these situations. I feel like I have that most of the time. Obviously, I have my misses as well, but I feel like at the end of the day, we're trying to predict the future, right? So we're not going to be 100%. We're going to have a lot of misses. I have a lot of things that I am wrong about, but I do have a lot of hits as well. It's a mixed bag. So in round 5, another one of my favorite players to draft. I'm the high upside guy. I like to draft safe players, don't get me wrong, but I also like to draft the guys who will just single-handedly win you your league. These guys who you can get in the later rounds who can absolutely outperform their ADP. In round 5 for me, that is Anthony Richardson. Where do I start with Anthony Richardson? A lot of people are going to, he's already injury prone. That was a freak injury, right? Anthony Richardson is not Tua. Anthony Richardson is not this small, fragile quarterback. Is Anthony Richardson still going to run the football? Absolutely. Maybe he runs out of bounds next time. But he's not this small little quarterback that's going to get crushed on every single play. He's one of the biggest quarterbacks in the league at 6'4", 240 pounds with 4.4 speed. He's an athletic freak, which means when he's running, most of the time he's going to make guys miss. So just had to get that out of the way in the beginning, because I think a lot of people, just because he got hurt last year and the concussions, which aren't a sticky thing either, those are a fluky thing, people think that that's going to be the case this year, which I highly disagree. He's not a small quarterback, and he's not this older quarterback either. He's 22 years old. So in his 2 full starts in his rookie year, he averaged 25.7 fantasy points per game. That was more than Josh Allen. That was more than any other quarterback for that matter. He led all quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback. He is a heck of a player. He's a tremendous talent, and he's in an incredible offense led by Shane Steichen, who knows how to transform these younger quarterbacks. He did it with Justin Herbert. He did it with Jalen Hurts. His system, his scheme, he knows how to cater it very well to the talent of his quarterback. You already saw that in that short sample size last year. Anthony Richardson was a touchdown machine. Every time he touched the ball, he was racking up fantasy points. So it's a mixture of immense talent. He's young. He's fast. He runs, which, if you haven't learned by now, running quarterbacks in fantasy football are cheat codes. Brilliant play caller in Shane Steichen. A ton of playmakers. Jonathan Taylor, A.D. Mitchell, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, and did I already say really good offensive line as well? So Richardson offers a safe floor because of his running ability and crazy upside because of his touchdown upside, because of his legs. And I think he's a better passer than most people give him credit for. Were his advanced metrics as a passer great last year? No, but those were his first 5 games of his NFL career. They're only going to get better from here. I'm betting on him taking another leap as a passer this season. And I think he has 40 plus total touchdowns this year. Easy. So he is a great quarterback to bet on. If you just look at Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, and then Anthony Richardson, I would take Richardson over CJ Stroud and Lamar Jackson. You never want to take... Patrick Mahomes doesn't run, but Patrick Mahomes could throw 50 touchdowns this year. It's close. I think Richardson is a top 3 quarterback for me. Josh Allen's 1. Jalen Hurts is in that group, and then it's probably Anthony Richardson, and then Patrick Mahomes. That's how good he is, and that's what you get when you bet on running quarterbacks. Josh Allen is the quarterback 1 almost every year because of what he brings in the rushing game. Look at the numbers. He throws a lot of touchdowns, but in 2022, Josh Allen threw 35 touchdowns and ran for 7. Last year, Josh Allen ran for 15 touchdowns. 15 touchdowns. That could absolutely be Anthony Richardson this year, which is why I'm a little weary about Jonathan Taylor this season. I still haven't really figured out how I feel about JT. I do think Richardson is going to steal a lot of work away from Taylor in the red zone. Different than what Hurts is going to do with Saquon Barkley. Hurts is a nice runner, but he's not the athlete, in my opinion, as a runner that Anthony Richardson is. I think they're going to be smart with him. He's going to throw more than he's going to run. Not so sure about Anthony Richardson. I think AR is still going to score probably 10 plus rushing touchdowns, which is why I don't love Jonathan Taylor at cost. And then we'll just touch on a couple more. So in round six, Ramondre Stevenson is one of my favorite values in drafts. Again, this is another example of a situation now that is completely different. Gerard Mayo at head coach, Alex Van Pelt as the offensive coordinator coming over from Cleveland, who is a run-focused, run-first offensive coordinator, turned Jerome Ford into a RB2 top 24 back. He looked really good just as an NFL running back last year. Upgrade at quarterback. I think Drake May takes the week 1 snaps. I don't think it's Jacoby Brissett. I think they're going to throw May in there right away. Upgraded weapons. I like some of the wide receivers that they brought in as well. Stevenson, it wasn't talked about and we don't know for sure, but I think Stevenson was hurt in the beginning of the year because in the middle of the season before he actually got hurt, broke his ankle or whatever it was, he had that stretch where he was really good. Even on a bad offense, he was really good. So you're telling me you can get the RB1 in round 6 for what I think is going to be a better, I don't think they'll be the worst offense in the league this year. And even if they are, 2 years ago, Stevenson was an RB1 in fantasy points per game. So love the player. He catches the ball. Not worried about Antonio Gibson. Love Stevenson in round 6. Round 7, Kyler Murray. Stack him with Trey McBride. Kyler Murray has the best weapons of his career. Kind of touched on him already. He's going to run a lot more, being another year removed from that ACL. Speaking of ACLs, in round 8, Jonathan Brooks is going to be a league winner down the stretch. Mark my words now. And I think he's going to be a monster for Carolina. I mean, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, come on. They're just guys. Jonathan Brooks is special. He's going to be the 3-down back for Carolina, and he's going to be a force to close out the year. You're drafting him in round 8 anyways. These are chasing upside. This isn't like, oh, if Jonathan Brooks doesn't pan out in the first half of the year, I'm going to lose. He's a round 8 pick. So bank on Brooks being dominant to close out the year when you need him the most. Those are my best picks in rounds 1 through 8. I can do a video where I go on some deeper dive late round targets. If you would like that, leave a like, comment down below what you want to see. Make sure you're subscribing. I don't really like to ask for subscribers, likes, and comments, but it really does help me know that you guys are liking this type of content. So don't like it if you didn't enjoy the video. I want you to truly give me a like, leave a comment, subscribe. If you think that we're a good fit, if you think that I'm going to help you win your league, if you like listening to me word vomit on you, then I appreciate you. Again, my goal in this space, I'm going to say it for the next couple of videos on YouTube, is to be real, raw, like we're just having a conversation in the backyard, talking fantasy football, and we're not just like throwing out all these stats. And we have a relationship. We're talking slow. We're being casual with it. I want to really connect with you guys, and I want to win you your league this year more than anything. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh yeah, that was fun. That was fun.